Good afternoon. While securing one's future financial security is more than just debit orders going off one or other saving or investment products every month, but it's also about being conscious about how and where your money is being invested. And some of those considerations to be made include whether you have the right fund manager, are their investments aligned with your personal and social development values, and will the returns offer you a comfortable life when you're no longer working? And helping us or joining the conversation now to help us dig a little bit more into it is Ben Kodisang, who is the founder and CEO of Impact Private Markets Investor Alt Capital Partners. Thank you so much, Ben, for your time. I think as a starting point, could you perhaps just help us lay the foundation and gives us insights into Alt Capital Partners, what it is that you guys do and what you specialize in when it comes to making those impact investments?
Thanks, Ntokozo. Pleasure being here. So, Alt Capital Partners is a licensed financial services provider. So, we are impact investors and we specialize in social impact retail funds. So, we are the manager of Reimagine Social Impact Retail Fund. We have about 2.6 billion rands of capacity to invest in South Africa, in convenience shopping centers, but mainly in rural and townships.
And Ben, when we did meet earlier this week or this past week is at Eskom's Pension and Provident Fund annual event, where they really outline their investment strategy when it comes to servicing their members and ensuring that they're able to comfortably retire. And before I get into my question, Ben, let's take a look at what the fund's CEO, Shafiq Abrahams, had to say.
But as a 73-year-old organization, with a projected lifespan, fund lifespan in excess of 80 years, which crosses generations, we have learned and we recognize that investment returns are generated within the system. And that system is called society. Our experience over these years has taught us that if there are elements that are unsustainable, are broken within society, they ultimately find expression in the valuations of companies that we are invested in. So whether it be the diesel cost of Pick and Pay, or the frustrations and of the operational performance of MTN and Vodacom, or the challenges of the mining and commodity sectors because of the frustrations of or challenges in Transnet, all of those risks come into our portfolio and reside in our portfolio.
Now, Ben, to Shafiq's point, perhaps talk us through infrastructure investments and in a market such as South Africa, why it's so essential to actually make that social impact, but also for the members or the people that have invested in those funds to see their returns once they actually get to retirement, because it's obviously a long-term investment.
Thanks, Ntokozo. So when we founded Reimagine, it was way back in 2020. And the problem that we were trying to solve, or when we looked at the country, we sit with the highest levels of inequality, high levels of unemployment, a population where 1 in 2 is actually not guaranteed a meal for the day. So by being an impact investor, it's a way then of addressing those social ills, while, as Shafiq said, at the same time generating investment returns. So because the monies that we manage are pension money, as in we manage monies for people saving for retirement. So it's our job to ensure that they can retire with confidence when they do. And the social impact is about redressing some of the, can I call it apartheid spatial planning? So that when people that come from the rural areas have got places to shop, and if they come within townships, that's actually decent places to shop as well.
And Ben, we'll get a little bit deeper into that rural and township economies and the opportunities there. But at the same event, we also heard from the lead investor at the private office of the President, Anthony Costa, who explained the bottlenecks to driving investments in certain sectors of infrastructure development. Take a look.
It's proved challenging. You know, we've managed to do it relatively easily in renewable energy. So renewable energy has been our biggest public-private investment success over the past decade. And it's really only worked because you've got an offtake in the form of Eskom and an implicit government guarantee. In terms of more complex infrastructure, particularly water and sanitation, where having, who is the offtake, the buyer, is it municipalities, local government balance sheets are strained, it adds a lot of complexity. So student housing has proven relatively easy, but that's quite small scale. I think the other elements, we haven't cracked the model yet, but I think work is certainly well advanced, and we should start to see some of those pipeline projects coming across the desks of investment committees.
Ben, do you share Costa's sentiments when it comes to those bottlenecks? And you would think issues like water, sanitation, when we're talking social impact, surely that should be important for making that social impact in South Africa. But if we're facing those bottlenecks to actually invest there, what are some of the bottlenecks that you've seen through your Reimagine funds?
Yeah, so at the core of it, you could argue it's a state that our municipalities find themselves in. So I think it's been well documented that municipalities, I think, are indebted to the tune of about 300 billion. So to do a shopping centre, you'll then appreciate that you need energy, you need roads, you need water. So you need that basic infrastructure, which we call bulk infrastructure, which then facilitates the construction companies to come in and actually do the top structure. So on the ground, those are some of the physical challenges. But what Costa is really talking about in terms of making these opportunities feasible or bankable is you need an offtake. So in the case of renewable energy, the offtake is normally Eskom that buys electricity, that makes it feasible. In our case, our offtakes are the retailers, because then they're signed leases. So with the case of water, it's difficult then to determine where is the offtake. Is it national, is it provincial, is it local? And if so, how to price it to make it bankable and feasible.
So all those considerations, really, even though the opportunities are there, still considerations to be made. And sticking to that EPPF's events that we had in the week, the transport sector was also there. We know the transport sector obviously going through those headwinds of trucks being torched and so on. And we did catch up with the transport sector retirement funds investment officer, who really spoke us through some of the issues that they face, and of course serving members in that important sector who move goods in South Africa, and a large chunk of those employees residing in rural and township economies with plans to go and retire there. And of course the transport sector's retirement funds investment officer, Grace Chauke, highlighted why investing in infrastructure in those markets is as important as the returns of the members. Let's take a listen.
It is a sweet spot for the fund, and what we have seen is that during the COVID years, when the financial market didn't perform well, those investments gave us a boost. So they protected the returns of the portfolio as a whole. But what is also key is that we take into consideration that our members need to retire in societies that are developed. So we build malls in townships, because most of them they'll retire in the township. We build social housing and schools and hospitals in townships, so that they don't have to spend a lot of money when they are in retirement, because then they don't have access to grow their retirement pot, going to hospitals or having their kids and grandchildren access to good education.
So my question to this, Ben, was really going to be, how do you then have a balanced portfolio in this regard when there are some of those issues and headwinds that are faced in that particular sector, but obviously you are investing in other sectors such as infrastructure and so on. But I'd like to just add to that question a little bit more. Some of the criticism that has come out when it comes to economic and township economies is that we are perhaps seeing too many retailers coming in and not a diversified investments in the townships. What do you say to that when Grace Chauke is saying that investments are happening to ensure that there are hospitals, there are schools, there are all these resources that when people did retire, they didn't find themselves now spending all their retirement on either getting grandchildren to school or getting the proper health care or being able to buy their bread, their milk and so on a daily basis?
No, very, very good question. So I suppose the longer picture or challenge that we have as society is how do we normalize society just given how population migration happened. So we've tended to have invested a lot in the cities or the urban areas at the expense of the rural areas and townships that remained largely uninvested in. So our infrastructure challenge is exactly that. How do we get schools, hospitals, clinics, shopping centers to create a balanced society where people can actually then live with dignity. So that is, I suppose, the infrastructure challenge. Because without that infrastructure, then it becomes difficult, I suppose, for business to actually happen and actually thrive. So infrastructure normally leads services as well as the rest of business. So I think this investment in these areas is absolutely critical to normalize our population.
Ben, I think let's take a quick break and allow our viewers to allow that to sink in. When we come back, we will dig into getting to know your fund manager, understanding where your funds are invested and ensuring that you choose the right fund manager that will align to your own personal values and goals. So do stay with us. Welcome back. Well, we are having a conversation around wealth creation and retirement planning. And we do have Ben Kodisang with us, who is the founder and CEO of Alt Capital Partners. Now, Ben, we've gotten into, I suppose, the sectors that you would be investing in. And at the end of the week, Cyril Ramaphosa was actually a special guest at the launch of Huawei's Innovation Center. And obviously that is within ICT. And it was really unpacked the role that ICT has to play for South Africa's economic growth and ensuring that more people are brought along in this growth. Let's take a look at what President Cyril Ramaphosa had to say at that event.
For South Africa, expanding digital infrastructure is one of the primary engines of economic growth that we've got to position ourselves well in. The development of information technology, as many of the presenters also said, is key to the competitiveness of any economy, and certainly of our economy as well.
What are your thoughts on that, Ben? I know you specialize, as you said, in infrastructure investments, but ICT, as we just said, that, you know, being an important economic driver, and President Cyril Ramaphosa as well, adding to that, what are your thoughts around ICT investments, but also for the development of those markets that you were talking about, rural and township economies?
Yeah, so let's maybe break it down in terms of infrastructure with a capital I. So the industry will talk about economic infrastructure, which means renewable energy, water, transport, ICT that the President just spoke about. And when we start talking about social infrastructure, it then refers to things like hospitals, affordable housing, retirement villages, as well as shopping centers. So you'll find then people will either be generalists in terms of playing across, or, but most of the time they tend to specialize within each particular area. But if you say, what are we trying to do with infrastructure, is to say we are thriving to achieve inclusive growth while generating jobs and employment. So ICT is communication, and communication is very important then in terms of enabling businesses to do what business does.
Yeah, and it's also important for developing skills in those communities so that they themselves can be innovative in some of the solutions that they bring into their community. Ben, before I let you go, we do have about 8-9 minutes to touch into this. Hugo will carry on the conversation looking at how South Africans can start their retirement planning and whether it's too late or too early to do so. But I would like us to get into, once people are actually investing for retirement, either through the employer or themselves, through a fund such as Alt Capital Partners, how do they choose the right fund to go with? How do they choose the right organization? How do you choose the products that you actually invest in to ensure that, yes, I might get the return and be able to live comfortably once I retire, but that, you know, I don't feel like I've sold my soul in the companies that I invested in, but it aligns with my values as well. How do average South Africans, and I include myself there, actually go about looking and doing that homework when it comes to that regard?
Okay, no, very good question. So if you allow me the liberty, let me maybe sketch the bigger picture to just link it to everything that we've been talking about. So all of us generally need to save. And if you look in the context of South Africa, the formalized savings environment in South Africa, we're talking about 3.8 trillion rands in terms of whether it's individuals or whether it's via institutions that's sitting in the savings pool. And savings need to be invested. And the question is, what do we invest in? So we've got what we call asset classes. So they can either invest in a JSE, which are listed shares, or they can invest in bonds or fixed income. They can invest in private equity, they can invest in infrastructure, in real estate or property, and so on. So generally, all those asset classes are managed by managers like ourselves. So we specialize in impact investing, specifically then on retail. And other managers will specialize in the listed sector, as I call it, which will be the listed equities and bonds and cash, etc. And so these managers are specialized. And the liabilities that we are all managing too, if it's institutions, and they are informed by the pension funds. So pension funds are normally regulated. So we talk about Regulation 28, which is a regulation that governs appropriate allocation of money to all these different buckets. And to a large extent, each pension fund then will have trustees, and trustees will employ investment consultants or consultants, and their job in the main is to look at the demographic of that pension fund. So what is the age profile of those members? Where do they live? When are they likely to retire? Because that information then informs what they call an investment policy statement, which is how should those assets be managed to suit those members. So in other words, if the demographic is young, you've got more years to retirement, so it normally means
a little bit more risk
you can
taking.
tolerate more risk. And if you're closer to retirement, you need to be more conservative or preserve capital, as we call it. And then your allocation then will steer more towards fixed income so that you can have an annuity when you retire. So the pensions world is very regulated. It's got a whole lot of professional people that ensure that members' monies are safe, etc. And on the retail side, or individual people like you and I, we've got also a lot of options. So we can either deal through our banks, right? Because a lot of banks and life companies will have private wealth departments or advisors that will advise you how to manage your money within the products that they offer. Outside of those two things, you've got financial advisors, and financial advisors are there to do exactly the same thing. So Ntokozo, they'll sit down with you and they'll take you through how would you like to retire, how much money do you like to retire with, when do you plan to retire? And based on those aspirations, they'll actually design a plan that will inform how much of your money should be local, how much of it should be overseas, within those two geographies, how much should be in equities, how much should be in fixed income, and so on. So that whole process is actually quite formalized. And if you don't want to use any of that, you've also got the latitude to self-service, which is called unit trust. So you can go through unit trust, and there are all sorts of different types of unit trust that you can choose to meet your particular need.
And Ben, like, I'm a business reporter, but that process is daunting for even myself to go through that, because there's really so many serious decisions that you have to make. And we will be hearing from some financial planners and advisors after the segments who will unpack a little bit more how to navigate that space. But quickly, we have run out of time. Just advice. It is tough times for South Africans looking to withdraw their providence. If we change jobs, we taking out from our provident fund just to make ends meet. A piece of advice that you would have for South Africans who are looking to take seriously their retirement planning, looking at funds like yours to invest, just a quick word of advice on really the benefits of investing in their future.
That's such a good question, Ntokozo. So South Africans, we are known to be spenders. We spend to keep up with the Joneses and the Khumalos, etc. So what's important, you don't need to spend. What you need to do is save and save and save. Because at the moment, as you're saying, as people change jobs, as people are not saving, we are actually sitting with a welfare challenge where a lot of people, when they retire, haven't got sufficient funds to live. So they end up working longer into the old age, which is also not feasible. So I would advise Cecily Society to take savings very, very seriously. Let's eat today what we need, but more importantly, think about how we save for tomorrow.
Ben, thank you so much for those insights. And of course, people are not keeping up with this Khumalo. She's still saving herself for her retirement. Thank you for your time, Ben. Of course, that was Ben Kodisang, who is the founder and CEO of Alt Capital Partners. And after the break, Hugo will dive a little bit deeper into the retirement planning and how to create that wealth for the future, no matter the income, race, and age. So how South Africans can prepare for a comfortable retirement where they are not relying, as Ben just said, on the state or their family. So do stay with us.